Hello and welcome to CTN. To learn more about the show, please visit ciotalknetwork.com. And today we have a rather interesting topic. The topic is the CIO as the conscience of AI. So if you look at the way we are running 100 miles an hour towards making best use of AI in the way we know, we have to make sure that a speed without judgment could sometimes become dangerous. And that's why we have to look at the way we are going to tackle AI. We have spoken about terms like responsible AI and others, but then there was someone within the organization has to take a look at it and say, yes, I would want to give you innovation. Yes, I want to give you automation. Yes, I want to give you the productivity and the performance and the profits better than ever. But are we shooting and then aiming? And if that's the case, and if there are areas where you feel you should not go ahead, then should CIO take that role, that responsibility, and should have that courage and can have that courage to say so. So let's talk about that. And for that, I have with me Earl Newsome, who's the Chief Information Officer with Cummins. Hey, Earl, how are you doing, sir?
How you doing? Nice to meet you.
Great to meet you, sir. And we also have Viren Shah, Chief Digital and Information Officer at AGCO. Hey, Viren, how's life, sir?
All good, all good. Thank you for inviting us to this amazing discussion.
Honor is all mine. So, Earl, let's start with this first question. That if we are under pressure, and we are, right? In many cases, there's a competitive edge that we want to leverage using AI. But could you define, is that zeal that is it translating into zeal for you to say, yes, let's do something? Or is it becoming pressure? And if it's a pressure, what kind?
So, thank you, Sanjog, for at least bringing this very important topic to the forefront of this podcast. This is actually a fantastic thing to talk about. And the way I wanted to start to talk about it, you'll find that I'm a storyteller, so forgive me my storytelling here. But when I think about IT and I think about AI, I think about the movie, Terminator: Rise of the Machines. I believe it was Terminator 3. A movie, the John Connor character is going about and he's trying to figure out, how do I stop the Judgment Day? Because he felt that was his mission. And he ends up in a bunker and he's surrounded by old computer tapes and things like that. And he is obviously a Skynet, right? But he also comes to the recognition, I'm not meant to stop Judgment Day, I'm meant to survive it. And that's his words that he uses. And he talks about, how do we not stop Judgment Day? Because maybe Judgment Day is inevitable, but our responsibility is to survive it. I build on that and say that our responsibility is not only to survive AI, because I don't think we're going to stop AI, nor are we really meant to survive AI. I think we're meant to thrive with AI. Right? And so if we think about how we as humans thrive with AI, I think that's the incumbent. It becomes a responsibility of the technologist to actually help us thrive with AI. And so I take on the responsibility of creating a thrival guide, not a survival guide, but a thrival guide for AI. And I think that begins with equipping people with, first, we have to understand the ills of AI. It can be wrong, it can hallucinate, it can use copyrighted materials, it can be biased. Therefore, it's our responsibility to put a human in the loop of every AI initiative that we do. And so not only a human in the loop, I've also now come to the conclusion, heard this as well, as a human over the loop. So human oversight or human involvement, right, in every AI implementation or rollout that's out there. So I think, and that really points to what does it take to be responsible with AI? A responsible AI begins with the insertion of the human in the loop or the insertion of the human over the loop. And if you're doing that, you begin with the process of human in the loop or over the loop. And that's the way that we've done it, even in the Cummins, is that responsible AI begins with that designation. In fact, our responsible AI policy includes the human in the loop, and then we'll now begin thinking about human overloop or human oversight over the utilization of OI. And that becomes our responsibility of injecting the human into the AI loop or the AI execution. So that's kind of the way that I think about it. I also think about it in this way, that AI is not coming for your job, but the person using AI is. And so part of our responsibility of responsible AI is teaching everybody on how to use AI in the furtherance of their role of responsibility. And we've got this dual responsibility of making sure that we have a human in the loop or over the loop, as well as we're training our employees and population on how to get the maximum value of AI in the execution of the role or responsibility.
Based on what Earl just said, the thrival or the survival approach. When you wear a thrival approach, then of course I'm not saying you're going to ignore the obstacles, because there are always obstacles. And if you become an entrepreneur, and like Steve Jobs said, you have to be foolish and stupid for you to get something great done, right? So does that in this space make us delusional? Or there is a risk of becoming delusional when we start ignoring it? Because the reason this topic was brought up is because there are enough people who are trying to be that Steve Jobs and become delusional, and because that's why they are doing this great innovation from the AI standpoint. But where we are coming from an enterprise context, you can only have so much Steve Jobs or delusional thinking that can go, because you want to allow an environment which is not command and control, but it's like putting brakes on a Ferrari. What do you think? Because the first question was around the kind of pressure that you feel. Let's move that word to responsibility. What do you think CIO's responsibility be in this context?
So if I would say, and I've talked about this before in a few forums, is the ecosystem of a corporation, lifeblood of it is information. And us as, I would call us as chief ecosystem officers now, versus just chief information officers, because we are now not only responsible, going back to your question, of ensuring that, the job of just run the operations, create new capabilities. Now we are also becoming more and more responsible for the whole ecosystem, because today information is the lifeblood of a corporation. And if we are not ensuring that, yes, we have to keep it safe, we have to keep it secure, we have to keep deriving intelligence out of it, which is where AI is critical and is going to play a bigger and bigger role as we go along this journey. But how do we keep the ecosystem healthy is going to be very critical, because it goes back to, you take any ecosystem, or just the fact that, I equate AI, and the definition I have is no different than we as humans got in touch with fire. And that's what made us on top of the ecosystem as the being, and where we started controlling the ecosystem way more in the future. Very similarly with AI, whoever manages, is able to use the right way to get a lot of value, is going to be on top of the ecosystem. But the question we have to answer, and that's the responsibility, most of us as CIOs are the role, as I call it, the ecosystem officer, has to be making sure that the ecosystem does not get diluted of all its resources appropriately, because that's when you start making mistakes. That's when you become, or lack of better term, selfish. And that's when you start have to worry about responsible AI, ethical AI, and those other aspects. Are we ethical today? 100%. That is always being the focus. It is only when we know as corporations, and we have seen in history multiple times, when corporations lose their purpose, corporations lose why they exist, and corporations start wanting to become more and more selfish towards taking a lot out of the ecosystem and giving back into it, that's when we will struggle. And very similarly, in any corporation, we have to be very, very cautious of our ambition, but at the same time, balance it with accountability.
I want to double on what Viren said, and I think that there's an interesting thing. You were talking about the ecosystem, and how human beings actually represent the highest level of the ecosystem. And data being the lifeblood of the corporation, maybe it's of the corporation, of the community, of the country. I wouldn't even go further than just data. It's, the ladder of inference, right? It's called DIKW, data, information, knowledge, and wisdom, right? So data is just data. It's a collection of bits, right? Turning that data, doing some analysis, and becomes information. The interpretation of that information becomes knowledge. The application of that knowledge becomes wisdom, right? And so when you think DIKW and responsible AI, I think we're at the precipice in terms of our responsibility. And I love this idea that we're pivoting from pressure to responsibility. Because if you think about DIKW and wisdom now being the lifeblood of an organization, of a company, or the way that we operate and the way we apply that wisdom determines how the outcome of how we live and how we're responsible for society. And that's really what the ecosystem charges us with as the highest order of the ecosystem. What separates us from every other order within the ecosystem is our ability to retain collective intelligence, our wisdom. And because of our unique capability as humans to pass on collective wisdom from one generation to another, that enables us to have to rethink about how we build fire, because it's already here, and so we build on wisdom through the various levels of humanity. And as that ecosystem continues to evolve, and as that wisdom continues to evolve, which represents our collective intelligence, and now AI, this is for the first time, because every other communication mechanism sharing collective intelligence only just shared it, right? So when we went from grunting to language, from language to pictures and writing, to writing to printing, to voice, to audio, we were just passing on collective intelligence so that we can build upon it, right? Versus with artificial intelligence, this is the first time we're actually able to create collective intelligence from previous intelligence with the advent of a human being doing that. And so our responsibility is even greater in this ecosystem, in this higher order world of creating and sharing wisdom, that our responsibility, this collective intelligence, or this means of generating collective intelligence, is now greater than ever before.
So to that end, what I would like to ask is what you just said, and I'll take this to Viren now. We spoke about productivity, we spoke about doing things faster, we spoke about bringing ecosystem together. But all of that, like anything else, considering AI as an enabler, was to make some progress which would be meaningful. I'm very carefully picking up the words here, okay? So, you could think like a CFO, and CFO will say, okay, whatever helps me save money, increase my bottom line, I'm going to look at that. CEO will say, whatever will give me growth, I will look at that. And while you're supposed to support both of them, primarily, and operations guy will say, okay, CEO will say, get me the lowest cost of operating something. But when we were looking at the progress, which is real sense will move us to the next level so that we have more collective intelligence to give to the next layer. I'm just going to very carefully, craft this question and then the statement. Are we actually focusing on that, or are we getting lost in how do I do things cheaper? How do I do things bigger? How to do a bottom line? Because what progress needs to be meaningful, should be meaningful not to just the shareholder, but to what we are setting out to do as humans. And so I'm your CIO. Your allegiance is to the company, but what you do or not allowed to do will also shape what your next generation or the next level of collective intelligence you'll take to people. To that end, I want you to comment, Viren.
So you just touch a very important question that all of us are struggling with is value. Many of us, including, if you hear every other day on Elon Musk, is like, hey, is AI a bubble or not? Yeah, it's value. What is the value? And I think for me, that is exactly a very important question the organizations need to answer. So for example's sake, our fundamental challenge is the value AI will create. I don't even know if we know how to measure it yet. Or the fact that the metrics we are using, they have to change. So I'll give you the simple answer. As a CIO or in the technology department, do I ever measure what is the cost of every line of code? I don't. But also, I do not ever question the line of code I write, what's the value it's going to create. And I think unless we start changing the metric, which is very critical here, the ability to define value creation is going to be complicated. So what will happen at the end, we will say, hey, all this investment, where did it go? Because we want to see it in dollar terms, which we should be, because somehow that value creation is happening and needs to happen. I think the challenge is measuring it. The second aspect is the biggest thing we don't measure. And I think the more we have become more and more capitalistic is how do we measure the competency we are creating in our team members? So for us, is AI a cost conversation or AI a creativity conversation? I would index more towards creativity because I would say, hey, if I can make our team members more and more skilled, going back to what Earl mentioned, hey, how do I use this AI and become more and more intelligent and deploy it? Then I can actually generate more value of what I learned, which is what we did with education for decades and years and centuries. So this is no different. And I think what I would strongly recommend, and this is my personal view, is it's going to be creativity, it's going to be value creation versus, hey, just, deploy AI and take headcount out and it becomes a cost conversation. And that to me is probably a very big aspect that a lot of us have to be thinking about because there are three issues with AI. There are organizations who are waiting to understand what it means, and they are the ones who are going to be left behind the most. The organizations or people who just want to dump the work on AI, but the impact of that is we're going to lose our cognitive abilities, which is basically now means, hey, what am I really supposed to do? You're going to struggle with that. The ones who are going to thrive on is who's going to say, human intelligence plus AI intelligence becomes 8 times more valuable. And that's the ones who I believe are going to try. And I think that's the formula I believe we should work in an organization. My personal opinion.
And see, Earl, I will share some data. So we spoke to a lot of leaders on the IT side, right? That's who we are. And a huge percentage of them, they said that most of our cost-saving initiatives get approved. Others, which are more creativity / next generation thinking / innovation, etc., doesn't get approved as much. And then, as a result of it, once we are done with all the cost, saving initiatives, then people are not twiddling thumbs, they're still playing with it. But that's why they say most the AI is not creating value, the use cases are not there, and you see a hue and cry of that. But then behind the scenes conversation is someone is not valuing at the top the art of the possible and investing towards it. So if we were a VC as companies, we are coming across as bean counters, not as VCs in fact. We are becoming more bean counters to say, let's first get the value, and nothing wrong with that. So you clean the house, make it as efficient as possible. But is that the real value of something as disruptive or the potential of being disruptive as AI? So is somebody's performance appraisal of somebody's role who is making these decisions, their performance appraisal should change, because people don't do what you expect. People do what they inspect and what they are measured on. So you take the C-suite, you take the layer below. So is this a systemic issue, or is it a leave it to God problem, or we can do something about this? So Earl, to you.
It's a great question. And maybe I'll build a little bit what was on even just earlier is that I think, he's spot on just in terms of the metric is the problem. And I think about it this way. I often say, people say, what's the value of spell check? Right? AI is spell check. Does anybody question, like your line of code, does anybody question the value of spell check? No. But would you use a product without it? Probably not. Right? And so, the way I think about it is spell check, or even as fundamental as air, AI is going to become as fundamental as spell check or air. And we got to stop trying to think about the question, what's the value of AI versus what's the outcome of using AI in the product or service that I'm implementing? That's what you're looking at. AI is going to make whatever it is you're doing better or more enthusiastic. And so I think we've got to change the question to not what the value of AI is, but what is the impact of AI on my product or services? Because I come from a fundamental belief that whoever figures AI in their industry will win that industry. So it's not about, again, the value of individual AI. It's about how do I apply intelligence or collective intelligence, or my ability to create a collective intelligence, because nobody's like the value of education, what you're talking about. We put a dollar value in it. We know if we apply intelligence to a process or service, we'll get a better outcome. So think about it that way. Change the metric to your point. Change what you're measuring. Say, how are you using AI in your goods and services? So when you think about performance management, how are you leveraging the tools that we give you? How are you leveraging to create better outcomes for your customers, your employees, your communities, et cetera, your stakeholders? Then measure the outcome there. Before AI, it was this. Post AI, it was that. That has value, and then you'll determine where the value comes from, where you apply AI at. That to me is the question. Change it toward the outcome, not the application.
So Viren, if what Earl just said, and frankly, it's the right thing to say and do. One is to do it on a podcast like this or a panel discussion. Another is to take it and become either the evangelist or the class monitor who says you better not do this crazy cool things only. You better come to this, and you are enabled, you are empowered, and you actively feel that I got to take the charge because that's what's going to make me a better leader. Tell me from principles or cool things to practice. What has happened so far in the last 2.5 years or more since I've been around? Have you guys been able to become the policeman or the monitor or the evangelist? What have you become as CIOs?
Well, all of the above, I think, depends on the days. What I say. But I truly believe, I think the ownership is on us. At the end of the day, and just like everything else, I think if we believe in the value creation of AI, if we believe in the fact that we have to make sure that the organization is aligned and it needs to be brought along. It requires patience, it requires time. But most importantly, it requires the tenacity, right? And at the same time, you have to work with the constraint of hey, the ethics aspect of it, the security aspect of it, the risk aspect of it. And is it easy? No, not at all. But, you know, I am very fortunate. I work within an organization where the leadership is quite aligned and understand that, hey, we know there is a lot of value here, and I'm getting the support I need to be the evangelist. And I think that to me is a very important part of the puzzle. Is we have to find all the uh, support system required to do this work, and it's not easy. You know, with all due respect, there's a lot of folks on public forums who say AI and AI. And if you just ask this, like, hey, you know what? Did you actually use Copilot to create an agent yourself? And you will get the answer, which I don't have to say what the answer would be, right? So I think everybody needs to understand, and how are we helping everybody get there is important. So going back to you asked, what's our role? Our role is of an evangelist. Our role is of a protector. But I think our role as a teacher, our role as a facilitator, our role as coordinator is as critical right now, because we have to help everybody understand what, why, and it's a lot of effort.
But you've given all the roles. Would you pick up the role of the monitor as well, where you say no when something is going out of hand or something is principally what the organization had set out to do is going against the grain? And are you allowed? And are you saying no?
So there are two aspects to that. The answer is yes, I would say no. And do I say no? Yes, I say no. And I would also say that by default, the responsibility is on the shoulders of the people who in an organization are more well versed with this than the people who aren't. So it's not a responsibility, it's an obligation. And by the way, this is no different than cybersecurity. We as information technology owners in any organization, by default, are obligated and responsible for cyber. This is no different, because, for lack of better terms, we probably have a little bit more understanding, but we need to bring everybody's understanding at the same level. Then you don't have to play the role of the class monk.
And what about, Earl, this is for you. What about the situations where the folks who are trying to do AI, like, on their new role, like chief data officer came out when the data was, the data organization was with, well, now they're chief AI officer. And you've got other people, non-IT, non-CIO organization related roles are coming up. And they're saying, let us take charge. I'm not sure if it's a territorial battle, is it a turf war? I don't know. But that's coming up. And in that, are you invited as the monitor, as the evangelist, as the trainer, as the caretaker? What is the role in the newer organization construct, especially in context of AI?
I think that's a great question. I think you're going to see this happen all over the board. We take up a few roles. I like this idea about thinking about CIO, these various roles that you just described, whether it's the evangelist, the policeman, the monitor, the teacher, I had the protagonist and the antagonist. Right? I think sometimes you'll have to be all of these things, right? Also, want to get to your question a little bit about, yes or no. Are you saying no from the monitor perspective? I think we pivot to maybe it's not a no, but it's a no. Or think about improvisational leadership with yes and, right? Yes, have we thought about this? Or yes, have we thought about this? So I think there's a role as an improvisational leader, especially in AI, for it to be more improvisational than as to be anything else, right? And so it's the no, not now, and the yes and mindset, right? That lets you think about this in a new and different way. Because again, think about new metrics, and those kinds of things. And I think with this expansion of business technologies, and I'll talk a little bit about how we've approached it, right? We began with responsible AI and setting the framework from which us to operate and execute and develop and test AI in. And then I enabled the business units and functions to experiment and explore at scale. So that actually created what you just described, other people getting involved and using technologies in new and innovative ways. And I'm actually encouraging exploration and experimentation within the guardrails that have been established by the responsible AI policy. So first establish responsible AI, and then unleash your organization to experiment and explore, to be those and be the antagonist. They're asking them, are you thinking about this the right way? Be a protagonist, be a teacher, be evangelist. Do all of those things, right, to make sure that you're experimenting and exploring within your business unit functions, letting 1,000 flowers bloom, right? And once you let that 1,000 flowers bloom, I call my working team really the botanists or the florists that go out and harvest those flowers, looking for the most beautiful flowers out there, bundling those into a beautiful bouquet, and then we'll go scale those at enterprise level. And so that's where we thought about it. Thinking about responsibility first, allowing experimentation, exploration to occur at the business unit function level, working with various AI leaders that are emerging in the organization. So we've got leaders emerging in engineering, we've got some emerging in sales, whether you want to call them AI evangelists, business unit AI leaders, AI entrepreneurs, all of those things exist in your workspace. You just got to go find them, embrace them. We call that embracing shadow IT. Don't hide from it. Put a light onto it. Enable shadow IT. Embrace it. And enable shadow AI. Look for these AI evangelists in your organization. Enable them to execute and experiment responsibly. Look for the opportunities where you see growth, and then harvest those flowers and let them bloom at an enterprise basis. That's kind of the way I'm thinking about it. I also think, like the MIT thing got it wrong, saying 95% of AI projects fail. That's a big thing. I think we're in the beginning part of this innovation exploration stage. So if 5 to 10% of our innovations succeed, that's actually pretty good. So if you changed your mindset from 95% expectation of success to 95 or 90% expectation of learning with 10% success, you'll actually have the right approach to AI.
So other than those, the two roles, philosopher and moral police, is one also I could add to the mix if really we were to go that route. But then this could be seen as a self-inflicted thing, which a CIO might take, but then there may be a pushback from HR and from executive leadership that who on earth are you for you to take this on? Or should there be an organizational design change which should allow you to do what you were supposed to do and which you feel you ought to be doing? But are you able to get HR to think that CIO needs to have their roles evolve? Are you saying, help me help you?
Well, I am very fortunate to have a great HR partner where we actually work so much together. Where a lot of our AI use cases we began with is in HR. So for me, I'm quite fortunate that way. But I would say this goes back to what you mentioned. It's very important. We can't make this territorial. And I think that is the biggest caution I would in any of the many roles you mentioned that we have. We cannot make this territorial because it cannot be unless you democratize it. And like Earl mentioned, we use the word shadow AI, I call it business AI, business IT, either ways. But we have to democratize this. The power has to be in the hand of the user. The user needs to become the creator, because that's the only way actually we'll be able to be better with ethical aspect of it and the responsible AI. Because then we are all in this together, trying to protect what's right, trying to do what's right, trying to do it ethically. And hence, many different words are being used, but adapt before you adopt is going to be a critical principle. Is we have to keep adapting, we have to keep experimenting, we have to make sure that we are challenging each other as we go along the way. But at the end of the day, we will have to ensure that this is in the hands of the user. And hence some feedback loops, community of practices, uh, some risk registers, responsible AI committees, and things like that, that will shepherd these adaptations or experimentations as we go along the way are going to be critical. So I would say a lot of shepherding is going to be needed versus plus one, because the worst thing you can do is put a gate and then everybody has to go through that gate, just choke the whole thing. And I think that's why I believe shepherding, giving people guardrails, enabling and supporting them as we go along this journey together. But adaptation before adoption is going to be.
I think it's really important. Just because I think he's spot on. We can't be territorial in it. And we remember the whole democratization is essential to adoption, right? I think this, when we call it citizen developers in the past, citizen development, we need to do the same thing on steroids with AI, right? So citizen AI developers, business AI, I love that term. That's why I call it AI evangelists in business. Those are people we want to think about. And I also think it's becoming more important as the realization, Andreessen Horowitz, as he talked about this thing, and Mark Andreessen said, software's eating the world, back in 2011, I think is when that came out. As software eats the world, as software eats your industry, as each of us become more and more software centric, it's no longer just a domain. Software is no longer just a domain of the CIO, right? Software is now the domain of business, right? Software is business is software. When we're going back, digital is business and business is digital. Now software is business and business is software. And that's becoming more and more the reality. And as that comes, especially with AI and with vibe coding and things like that, we need to figure out ways to unleash the power of our populations, not contain it and constrain it, but release it in an ethical, responsible way so that everyone can become a software developer. I even seen a test where they said, well, we're going to turn on a vibe coding exercise and we're going to have the CEO try vibe coding and create some software for themselves. Now, they can't create the full thing, but they can create an idea. Then you take that idea that was created, you run it through your software engine and make it robust and reliable and secure. And then you now have enabled something new in your business that could transform the way you operate. That's the way we need to think about it.
So to make CIO as the conscience of AI, I'm trying to bring the topic angle back. Would you be a yes and, yes, no but, or no level leader? I've given you 4 very distinct categories and you would fall in one or the other, or maybe somewhere in between. So I will repeat them. Yes and, yes, no but, or no. What would you have to wear?
Yeah, from a conscious standpoint, again, I talk about improvisational leadership, and I'll start with the yes and, because I'm a big believer in yes and. I think we have to be the conscientious, leaders. I want to be the conscientious leader for AI in our company, starting with responsible, but pivoting quickly on exponential, right? Because I believe, yes, we need to be responsible, and we need to help and make you exponential in your role.
But I also want you to be able to say no. So you cannot just be the goody-goody guy for all possible situations, right?
Well, that's for the yes and. Yes, and have we thought about this risk? Yes, and have we considered this? So the and could be a reconsidering or repositioning of what's actually going on, so we can ensure that we're protecting our rights. We're not doing anything foolish. All of those things can come from yes and. And yes and will allow for us to consider the art of the possible, but protect our organization from something necessarily wrong.
Let me say what I would say, and I'm probably I'm saying the same thing and I was saying, but maybe a little bit differently. Is like it is yes and the wise no. Okay, because we have to say no when it's important. When we know, because conscience isn't a roadblock, it's how you avoid the wrong road. And you have to evaluate, is this a one-way door or two-way door? Like, can you make a mistake and come back? Or this world, no ways, right? So it is the wise no is what I would change your, the four things you gave, and I would say yes, and a wise is probably the way I would.
So Viren, if something was right, I know you know it is right, but that is not jiving well with what is expected, what would you do?
It's no different than without AI. What have you been doing? There's been a challenge all day, every day, right?
Right.
And I think it's just a question of going back to, sometimes it's instinct, sometimes you have to trust your own voice and find a way to align. And that to me is probably most of, our roles, I guess, activity that we perform during the day is alignment, is how do we make sure if we believe is the right thing to do, then, many times you have to bring the data or you have to bring the relationship, either one of the two, whatever works. But at the end of the day, if you believe it's the right thing to do, then you have to pursue it. That's what keeps you going.
Well, I'll build on to that because I think, and maybe this would be a little cliche, right? But if you understand, live your values, right, and follow those things, the answer comes naturally to you. It doesn't have to be a question of judgment. It's a question of, am I living my values? Am I following my values, which state my belief system? And if we're doing that, and our values align with the things that we'll do, we'll make those decisions align with our values. Period.
So Art, what would make you proud in the way, whatever you do today is going to eventually in some form or fashion come across or will be a contribution towards how you shape AI or use of it within your organization? What would be that, not a North Star yet, but in a couple of years, you should be at a certain place, like a milestone, if you will. What would that milestone be, which you'd be proud of because you were able to shepherd and train and, do everything to that end?
Yeah, for me, I think it's all about democratization of AI, where every person in the organization is understanding it, is knows how to use it, and is creating measurable value. But most importantly, we have earned trust internally and externally. I think as much as we're talking about AI from an internal standpoint, there is a huge trust we have to build with our customers, especially if you're in a data-intensive industry. And I think for us, getting that trust that, hey, we are using AI, create measurable value, and you can trust us as we deploy AI is what success looks like today. Because for us, our farmers are very important. And, our whole goal is to help our farmers so that they can feed the world. So trust is very critical for us as part of this.
And Earl, what do you think? What would you want to be proud of based on what your contribution is going to be today in company?
To share this because I think it's along the same lines of what was just said, and that I often say, it's not my saying, but the best way to predict the future is to create it, right? I'm looking forward to create a world. I challenge my employees in my workforce to think about how do you create a world with you and AI in it where you're exponential. So I say AI is not coming for your job, but the person who's using AI is. Why don't you be that person who's using AI, coming for your own job, disrupting your own job, and creating a future that has you in it, that makes you indispensable? That, to me, if we can navigate that in the next 5 years, we can empower our workforce to do more than they've ever done before. And so it's our responsibility to calm the masses, right? And the AI's impact on the workforce is not an indeterminate, inexplicable thing we can't do anything about. It is actually something we can do something about. And so we know if we train our workforce to be prepared for the future, to create a future that has them in it and having them being indispensable in that future, that's our goal, is to retrain and retool our workforce. And that's the thing we might leave behind, is a retooled, reframed workforce that's more productive, more impactful than ever before. In fact, the World Economic Forum has just recently said this, and I may get the numbers wrong exactly, but they said, yes, there's going to be 90 or so million jobs impacted, but 180 million will be created. So let's be on this side of creating the 180 million new jobs for our workforce. That, to me, would be the most impactful thing we could do.
Once again, thank you so much, Earl and Viren, for sharing your thoughts on this topic of the CIO as the conscience of AI. And of course, we spoke about many other roles too. So I hope people will take that vocabulary of the type of roles they have to use and embrace them and create those moments, the value from AI, which they are very proud of. Thank you so much. And for our audience, please connect with us on our YouTube channel, podcasts, and all social channels where we try to create value. Thank you again. This is Sanjog Aul, your host, signing off. Till next time, take care and God bless.